Should we be afraid of nuclear war? Well, the short answer is no, but we should be informed about it. I'm recording this in the middle of the war in Ukraine, or I don't actually know if it's in the middle. We're about 6 weeks into the Russian invasion, and it could still be the beginning. But to those of you who don't follow Danish television, I'm one of those military experts who go on TV and talk about the war. And some of the questions I get a lot are about nuclear weapons and the risk of nuclear war and World War III. And people also reach out to me in private with their concerns. So it's a topic that I feel that there is a need to address. And it's always some of the hardest questions to answer because it's so emotional. I think that I have a responsibility to give information that gives the right picture. But that's not only a question of giving accurate facts, but also about addressing people's emotional concerns about nuclear war. And by that, I mean not scaring people unnecessarily by saying something that is insensitive, because I'm used to dealing with these things. So for me, it's not that special. But for most people, the idea of nuclear war was something that they didn't think about until recently. But it's hard with a topic like nuclear weapons, because how do you strike that balance? On the one hand, these weapons are terrible, and giving accurate information means that you also talk about that. And in fact, that's actually the point of nuclear weapons. They're supposed to be terrible. But on the other hand, it's also very unlikely that they will be used. So the probability of nuclear war is very low. And these two facts have to go hand in hand. So I think the right picture about nuclear weapons is that you can't focus on one of these facts and not the other one. So in this video, I want to give the explanation about nuclear weapons that I think is a good introduction for someone who's new to the problem and wants to understand what's going on. The most important thing to know is that nuclear weapons are not really about war, but about limiting the options for our politicians in peace. So the existence of nuclear weapons puts a lot of restraints on our options in foreign politics. And our politicians have to understand these dynamics, because then they can navigate in the security space and make smart decisions, so we never get to the point where nuclear weapons could actually be used. And this is new, especially in Europe, because we have a whole generation of politicians who are not used to thinking about nuclear weapons and who need to learn it. So the basic idea of nuclear strategy is that nuclear powers can't fight wars with each other because it's too dangerous. And I recently made a video about the concept of military deterrence, and I mentioned that there are two types of deterrence, namely deterrence by punishment and deterrence by denial. And if you want to see that video, I'll put a link in the video description. But nuclear weapons are the ultimate deterrence by punishment weapon. And the logic is that if you cross a certain red line, then you will suffer the punishment of these nuclear weapons. So you better make sure to stay below that threshold so that doesn't happen. And therefore, nuclear powers have to be attentive to the red lines of the other side so that they don't cross them. And in practical terms, the consequence of that is that nuclear powers have to find other ways to solve their problems, because fighting a war is just too dangerous, because you get too close to those red lines. And this actually worked pretty well during the Cold War, where the politicians managed to avoid war for more than 40 years. And there are many scholars who believe that nuclear weapons are actually the reason why the Cold War never turned into a hot war. That without nuclear weapons, there would have been a war between NATO and the Warsaw Pact. And that is a plausible hypothesis, because there are many things that suggest that nuclear weapons actually do keep states from engaging in war. We actually have a current example in the Ukraine war where there is a humanitarian disaster, and it's pretty obvious that Russia is committing systematic war crimes. So if we imagine for a moment that Russia didn't have any nuclear weapons, I think it's almost guaranteed that someone, either the United States or some countries from Europe would have engaged in this war to help Ukraine against Russia. So that would have been an escalation of the war in Ukraine. But that has not happened because Russia is Russia and they do have nuclear weapons. So that's how the existence of nuclear weapons limits the options that politicians have in international politics. There are certain things that we can't do because the other side has nuclear weapons. And that is, I think, the right way to think about nuclear weapons in this new security environment. We should not go around and be afraid and let it control our lives because that's not rational. Like, nuclear weapons are not actually that dangerous if we understand how they influence international politics. Their role is to limit the possible options that we have as a state in peacetime and not so much to be used in actual war. And that's, of course, something that our politicians have to learn, but it's not something that we should be afraid of as ordinary people in our daily lives. And with that, I'm going to end it here. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again next time.